All right, I'm back, and I'm back with Breya once again. And the reason for that is that the opposition agent and hull breacher are so scary that I think they are more threatening than Jeweled Lotus is powerful. So the reason to switch from Brea to Zur was that Jeweled Lotus added additional level of power to decks that can take advantage of it. Brea can't really take advantage of it, but Zur certainly can. Getting that turn 2 Zur is just insane. So we switched over to Zur. The problem is Zur struggles more with Hull Breacher and Opposition Agent, particularly an Opposition Agent. You do turn 2 Zur, turn 3 attack, and they do turn 3 flash out an Opposition Agent. And if you can't stop that thing, you lose on the spot. Basically, they're going to go get your Necropotence to kill you with it. So uh, I think that of the two, because of I think that Opposition Agent and Hull Breacher is more threatening than just Jeweled Lotus. I actually prefer to be on the Brea team, and the reason I prefer to be on Brea is that while Black also provides in blue and white do have answers for Hull Breacher and Opposition Agent. Of course, the most obvious is Swords to Plowshares, but then you've got things like Path to Exile. You've got Fatal Push if you have a fetch land to go with it. You've got Diabolic Edict if they don't have another creature. You've got in blue, any number of bounce spells. So you do have things like that. None of it's really great. It's none of it's like you're not happy rifting a hull breacher, for example. Although you are happier than being, having your draw impacted by it, but still. On the other hand, red gives you access to very easy, cheap solutions. A Braid is an excellent card. Fire Ice is excellent. These cards are very good against control in general. The ice side and the artifact killing side, very, very good. And then, of course, the fact that those cards can solve a hull breacher or a opposition agent for cheaper than it costs them to play it and do it at instant speed is very, very good. In the other version of the deck, I had the one that drown. What is it called? Drown in the Lock, which is a counter spell or destroys target creature converted CMC less than the number of cards in its controller's graveyard, which was really good in its colors to solve those, provided the opponent had at least 3 cards in their graveyard. But it does come with that, provided the opponent has 3 in their graveyard. They might not. It's also blue and black, which means you can force a will with it, which is pretty cool, but you struggle to play it a little bit more, barring something like a talisman. It's a little bit harder to play it, so it can be more challenging on your mana base. And so when I contrast that card that has some drawbacks, and of course the Zur deck wants to exile graveyards ultimately with Rest in Peace, at which point it becomes nearly useless. You can counter 0 casting cost spells like, for example, you could counterspell a Pact of Negation, but I mean, you're really stretching at that point. Mana Crypt being the most probably obvious one, but obviously, Mana Crypt comes down for 0. This thing costs 2. It's kind of hard to make that work, but sure, at some point in the middle of the game you could do it. Anyway, the point is, Drown in the Lock, it's a card that you use because I think it's either a card that you use when you just don't have superior options. But if you contrast that to a card like Fire Ice, which is just all around awesome, it deals with Hull Breacher, it deals with Opposition Agent, but it also has the ice side. So, you go land, they go land, Mana Vault pass, you go land, tap your Mana Vault, draw a card. It's like you disenchanted it and drew a card, and they start taking damage. It's freaking awesome. You can also force a will with it. The Fireside can take out multiple mana dorks. It's just an amazing card. A Braid, just super flexible for what it does. Being able to kill artifacts in this format at cheap is super important. And of course, cheap creatures is also pretty important, right? So a Braid's, just very good. Fire Ice, of course, also kills a Dark Confidant, stuff like that. So good stuff. So red just offers a little bit more, and then red offers the ultimate card that's sort of not synonymous, but could be contrasted to the white counterpart, which is Lightning Bolt, as is white gets swords to plowshares. Basically, for most threats, especially early, especially those cards, each card is somewhat interchangeable, and so you just double up by playing both white and red. You get to double up on the number of 1-mana solutions. Pretty good. That doesn't require, like Fatal Push does, for you to have a fetch land or something along those lines. So I really like red, but also keep in mind Breya itself. If Breya is on the board, then you can make plays and you don't necessarily have to fear an opposition agent or a Hall Breacher, because provided you have mana untapped and in some other artifact in play, you can kill those cards at instant speed just with Breya's ability. So it really hurts those cards from hurting you, which is excellent. And so for those reasons, I want to move back to Breya. But I had to make a bunch of cuts. I kind of rebuilt the deck. I actually tore it apart and rebuilt it, and then said, well, where do I, like, kind of as a way of forcing myself to sort of imagine what I felt about how I put the deck together. And what I ended up doing is making a significant number of cuts and changes. I'm not convinced necessarily that all these are correct, but I'm certainly interested in some thoughts on the matter, because there are some changes I made that I feel cannot possibly be correct. However, the changes in place right now and the results have been very, very good. So over here, which you'll see, I had to move Mindtwist out of the way, but of course it's an X spell. It should be like way over here. But what I want to draw your attention to is these two piles here. So everything on the right was in the original version of Breya. Fire Ice and Abrade had made the cut sort of at the last minute in Breya, in the very last video, I believe, already. But so I won't necessarily include those in the change pile, but they are pretty new. I mean, old cards that I've been using off and on for a long time, but they're pretty new as far as being stapled into the deck. But I think that they are probably permanent additions, at least until / unless Hall Breacher and Opposition Agent are dealt with, and even then, maybe not. Incidentally, Ice, of course, as somebody pointed out, is fantastic when you're running a Winter Orb deck, because you can ice your orb. And normally, if you cheat the orb at least once, you're way ahead. Winter Orb typically puts you in a really good position if you can cheat the mana, like get all of your lands untapped under a Winter Orb. Obviously, the best way is Sword of Feast and Famine, but you can cheat the orb with Teferi. You can use Artifact Mana to play a Treachery and then get all your lands back. And now you've got Ice. So if you can do that, it's typically super powerful and gives you so much of a mana advantage. Often that's enough to seal a game. You don't necessarily have to do it endlessly, which is good, because I actually pulled a mana source that would have allowed me to repeatedly cheat the orb, simply to get the costs down in the stack. So what I've done is changes on the right, cuts on the right, and additions on the left. So here's the scoop on that, basically. So first of all, the card I was referring to that repeatedly cheated the orb is Urza. I pulled Urza out of the list, and I just replaced it with a Signet. At 4 mana, getting 1 extra mana source into play. Multiples if you have artifacts laying around, obviously. Like you have Sensei's Top, and you have a Vedalken Shackles, and a Jitte just sitting there doing nothing. Of course, if you have Winter Orb, it's insane. If you have Breya tokens, like then Urza becomes really good. That's the whole reason why you put it in the first place. Plus, it's a human. You can force out under a Cavern of Souls, but the problem with that is that it's sort of like Urza's sort of like in this deck a Thran Dynamo that doesn't always produce three mana, right? It makes blue because you get the monster you get the construct, and then you can tap that thing for blue. So it does make blue, but I mean 4 mana for if you don't have anything else going, it's 4 mana for a Mox Sapphire, and a creature that's semi-relevant but not super relevant. Typically, like you're not tapping out to activate Urza because you'll hit a counterspell and then you're just going to feel sad, right? Or you're going to put yourself in a position where it's too risky to do that. You have to get it in a part in the game, like super mid game, where you have tons of mana, you're flooded, you've both fought, both of your hands are empty, you top deck Urza, and then you just activate it and cross your fingers and hope you didn't hit a counterspell, hope you hit something playable, and that the playable card has an impact. Even if it's playable, it could be like Expedition Map or something, and whoop-de-doo. But although with Mystic Sanctuary, that card's a little bit stronger than it used to be. But anyway, point is, it didn't. It was a 4 mana Mox Sapphire. That's most of the time. That's what it is. That then becomes multiple mana sources under certain conditions, versus a Signet, which is just 2 mana. It always does exactly what I want it to do, and it curves perfectly with Breya. I think of the two, I actually think that it's weird to say this, but it seems to me that if you can afford the Urza's better, but it's hard to justify and say that you can afford the Urza versus having the cheaper artifact that you certainly can afford. Like a 2 mana Urza hand is not necessarily a keep. A 2 mana Signet hand is almost always a keep. Just Signets are just so good. And of course, Urza can turn colorless sources like a Soul Ring into a blue source, but so can a Signet, and it doesn't require tapping the Soul Ring. Like the Soul Ring still produces 2 mana if you filter it through a Signet, versus tapping it for blue, in which case it only produces 1 with the Urza. So, I mean, like, I'm not arguing that Urza is bad or that it doesn't belong in a Winter Orb deck, but it might not belong in this Winter Orb deck. And Coalition Relic, the other cut, um, once again, Relic is way crazy with Mishra's Workshop, and maybe it'll come back. But for now, I figured, I'm just trying to get that curve down low. So here's the main thing: is we want to develop with cheap artifacts, and want to be able to still be able to cast things like Lightning Bolt and Abrade and Fire Ice in order to kill a Hull Breacher or counter magic, right? We want to be able to develop and still do something early on, because there are threats now that are cheaper, that are too threatening, and it's a lot less safe to tap a bunch of mana, like to wait till 3, then tap 3 mana, then play Coalition Relic, then charge it, then untap, and then try to deal with whatever happened while you were tapped out, right? Versus like a turn earlier, you're playing your Signet, and then you're playing your 4th land, and now you can make a 2 mana play and like Dark Confidant and still have a counter magic up. And that's just so much stronger that I think that I'd rather have the Signets than the Coalition Relic. Like I said, with the cheaper threats, I want to have cheaper plays and cheaper answers. It's just kind of a matter of the value of your cards is relative to the speed of the format. So it's the main reason why at one time the card Mana Drain was the ultimate definer of vintage format, and now I don't know if any decks even play Mana Drain, because 2 mana is too slow in Vintage, which is insane. But it's relative. The power of the card is relative to the speed of the format. So when the format's too fast, then 2 mana is 2 mana going second. That's the problem with Mana Drain, is that sometimes you go second, and so 2 mana going second, it's just too slow most of the time. Although I have my play set in case online anyway, in case I want to give it a shot and fool around with trying to make it good, because man, I love that card. But anyway, so I think Coalition Relic's falling into the same trap. So I've swapped it out for an artifact mana. Vindicate for a Signet here, it seems a little silly, but I don't even know if it's right, but I just needed more artifact mana, and I felt like I was bringing in. I have like more answers to, I have more burn, right? So like I can kill planeswalkers with burn, and as far as lands goes, I am a little bit weaker to certain lands, like enchanted lands with a lot of stuff on them. I'm definitely weaker to that. But I mean, I still have strip mine availability here, so I mean, we can deal with that. Enchantments, on the other hand, I am definitely weaker to. A card like Sylvan Library I can solve with a card like my own Hull Breacher, for example, but as long as I can stick it and protect it, but and get it on time, I guess. However, but that's kind of like Vindicate would have been my 3 mana, like Vindicate your Sylvan, and instead I've got 3 mana flash out Hull Breacher type of thing. So, maybe that's going to be okay. But it's one of those deals where at the end of the day, like, you got to make a cut somewhere, and I just decided that the 3 mana sorcery once again falls into this. You notice the problem over here. It's expensive in sorcery speed, expensive in sorcery speed, expensive in sorcery speed, and so that's where my 3 cuts happened. And then this next cut, I'm not even sure this is a direct cut, but I just kind of lined them up like this. But like I pulled the ready out and I put in bolt, and I know that the deck has to have bolt. Like it just has to have bolt. We've got to have cheap solutions to Hull Breacher and Opposition Agent. Like if you have your second land in play and you crack that fetch and they flash out Opposition Agent and you don't have bolt or plow or force, like you just lose on the spot. It's just turn two and you've lost the game. You've got to have it. So I know Bolt has to be in here, but I feel like I'm crazy not to run to ready in a Breya deck. Like I've got Skull Clamp, I've got Breya. I want to kill artifacts and creatures. Like this is exactly what this deck is trying to do. Doretti's got to be in here somewhere. This is actually the number one spot where I'm hoping you might be able to give me some ideas on where to slot the ready back into the deck. But I'm just not convinced, like, God darn, I really want the ready in here, but I'm just not sure. And the thing is, like, while Coalition Relic and Urza have the problem of being like really slow, and I've got these big clunky mana sources here, the thing is, by the time I get around the point where I'm going to be playing Thran or Lotus, I I often have found either Soul Ring, Vault, Crypt, Grim, or a Workshop. So the reason why these cards are better than these cards is Coalition Relic doesn't have enough of a payoff for me to like be excited about, like, say, Mana Vault into Coalition Relic on turn one is amazing, but mid game it's kind of not. And then I mean, I'd do it, but it's not like amazing. And then any of these other cards, like running out into like a Thran Dynamo or a Gilded Lotus, like these are all colorless sources that produce vast quantities of colorless mana temporarily in many cases, in two of the cases here, or here only, because it has to be invested in something, and then these two of course being permanent. But the point is, like, you've got three somewhat temporary cards that allow you to invest into a colorless mana source, and you really want to get a return on your investment that's worth the effort you went to it. And these two cards provide that return. Gilded Lotus is just awesome with a deck just running Necropotence anyway. So it's just awesome in that sense. And I'm actually no longer running Urborg. So it's one of my better ways to, like, the thought is, like, with Expedition Map, you can just Urborg into Necropotence early on, but with Expedition Map, you can Expedition Map into Workshop, and you'd rather go get Workshop almost every time. And then that allows you to make crazy plays like the Thran Dynamo, Gilded Lotus into Necro, that type of stuff. So these just have much bigger upsides than the Coalition Relic, and so I think they still stay here. Urza, of course, has an upside comparable to either of these, but I can't play Urza off the Workshop. I can play it off of some of these, kind of. I can pay for the two colorless with these guys. Obviously, it's best off a Crypt or a Soul Ring, but I still get to tap, I don't know, a few islands, which is specifically like what I would be using to protect, to protect such a play. Whereas with like Gilded Lotus or Thran, I can tap. Let's say I don't even have the Workshop, but I can tap like Vault and Scrubland or something. Like I can tap Vault, Scrubland, and cast Thran Dynamo and leave my 2 blue mana untapped. Whereas if I'm playing Urza, I tap Vault and my 2 blue and I leave my Scrubland untapped. And which one sounds better, right? So that's why I think these two cards probably still say you need like some big payoff for these early, like if you're going to run these temporary ramp cards, you want big payoffs. Obviously, Mind Twist is probably the biggest payoff, but these two cards are a major payoff as well. And these cards allow you to Vault and Grim are powerful enough that they allow you to fight against another blue deck because you can make multiple plays in the same turn. Like you get ahead of them in mana and make it so that their counter magic is not enough. Their counter magic exceeds their mana supply, while your threats do the same. And the only way for you to do it is if your mana supply exceeds theirs. So you get more mana than them, you play multiple threats, they can counter one of them, the other one resolves, or you play a single threat, they counter it and you counter back and it resolves. And so that's how one of the ways that you beat blue and counter heavy blue, and Thran Dynamo and Gilded Lotus aid in that. So I think they stay in. But having said that, I'm going to back way up. The other thing you can do though with like Grim Monolith and Mana Vault is you can use them early, and then you want to get rid of them. Mana Crypt also, and the Ready is the best way to do that. I mean, the only other way that's comparable to Duretti is Transmute Artifact. It can sack like a Crypt, and you can go get something else, and that's certainly quite good. But in colors, like for a Brea deck, like Duretti is amazing. So I really would like the Duretti, and if you guys can give me a suggestion on where, but if you suggest these guys, I'm not going to agree. I don't believe that these two insane cards, like these cards are these cards are just nuts, and I don't believe that it makes any sense. Once you've played the deck for a little while, you understand why you don't cut them, and basically the reason you don't cut them is because of this. It's because of the fuel. So if you can find some other cuts, on the other hand, I'd be interested in Duretti. In the meantime, I put in Bolt. I mean, it's that nasty Hull Breacher and opposition are just that nasty. Now I've added a bunch of red cards, so I went ahead and replaced rather transposed, I guess, my island for Ragran Triome. Ragran Triome is an extra plains for Tithe. It's fine off a fetch land, mid game. If you're just flooded and you draw it, you can cycle it. Those things are all good. Coming in play tapped sucks, and especially in a deck with Winter Orb. But it's probably something that you can work around to some extent. It does maintain the island count for Shackles and the island count for Mystic Sanctuary, so that's okay. So mostly I made that cut there. I had basic island. I think at one point I even didn't have an island at all, and what I had was a Urborg. So that's yet another, like, I guess that's probably more. I think this is actually more correct. I actually think that I had, now that I think about it, I think I had cut the island already, because I cut the island for Mystic Sanctuary a while back, so actually it was more like this. I pulled Urborg out and I put in Ragran Triome. Thing is, I've got more red sources now, and the Triome will just better aid me in casting these early cards that I need to cast. Of course, you can't go Triome into Lightning Bolt, I get that, but you can go fetch land into Triome and then untap and then bolt something, and that's still quite good, or untap and then fire something or abrade it. So works just fine for those purposes. Urborg doesn't. Urborg's only good basically with Necro, and sometimes it's a drawback because you play Urborg and you're feeding your opponent black mana. Like you're strip mining their undergrounds, and then you have an Urborg and you can't even afford to play it because they have all islands in play, and you don't want to just undo all the work you did to kill all their black sources. So Urborg had some drawbacks to it, and it doesn't produce blue either, and you can't fetch it with Tithe and so forth. So I think for all those reasons, this swap is an easy swap here. And also notice I pulled 2 black cards out and I added a red. Well, the red I guess is equal over here, but in the past I had added more red cards already. So yeah, I think I like that swap. It's actually one that I don't think I'll be looking back on too much. And you can live without Urborg. It'll be fine. The next swap, Disenchant for the Thieving Skydiver, is just it's a couple different things. So one, this deck has equipment like Clamp that rewards you for having 1 toughness, or that you want to put on your creature and connect with your opponent, like Jitte and Sword. Skydiver's a flyer, it lets you do that. 2, you can force a will with it, always good, and you're going to be focused on getting your blue mana over getting any other color, so a little bit more playable. 3, the effect is backbreakingly powerful. Getting access to Dak Faden's effect is just so good. I'm willing to take the Disenchant out and put the Skydiver in, and against decks where I need to kill an enchantment, this kind of sucks. But against decks where I need to kill an artifact, I will always prefer to resolve a Skydiver, even if I have to pay additional mana, because the theft effect is so beneficial most of the time, especially, of course, if you steal like a Soul Ring or something. Like, it's just totally insane how much value that provides. But even if you're taking a Signet, it's huge. And I think that swap is probably acceptable. Now, putting Disenchant in the deck in general is a great idea, and I'd love to have it. But another way to look at this swap here is that Thieving Skydiver always makes the cut, and then we actually swapped Disenchant for Abrade in the past. And to me, if you look at it that way, that Thieving Skydiver isn't even up for debate, and it's really Disenchant versus Abrade, then I still think that this is correct, because we've got to have more answers to these guys, and Abrade provides that, and Disenchant doesn't. And the number of enchantments you need to kill versus the number of times you need to kill one of these are much more threatening than what disenchant, like these are going to come up a lot more frequently. Plus, Abrade kills a lot of nasty commanders that will certainly come up. And so this is a creature-based deck format. So in some ways, it's a commander-based format. And, you know, even like my commander who has more than 3 toughness gets killed by an Abrade or a disenchant either way. So I don't even mind that swap. The only time this really comes up short is targeting a commander like Zur or something, but that's fine. It's not that big of a deal. Disenchant wasn't going to kill Zur anyway. So I kind of like, so basically that's the swap, but in reality, this is the swap. And I think that it is a correct swap. It may be correct, like I said, to run all 3. So run Skydiver, Abrade, and Disenchant. That might actually be right. But again, you only have so many spaces in the deck. And then lastly, Sphinx for Twisters. So Sphinx Reclamation is actually, you know, taking out the Ready and Coalition Relic, I guess in a way makes Fiends just a slight bit weaker just because you lose a couple of potential targets there. But on the other hand, we got Hull Breacher and Opposition Agent, and those are amazing targets for the Reclamation, potentially. I mean, gives away the secret, but it still, you know, puts the thumb screws on them. Do I get more? And man, Savines is so good when you replay like strip mines over and over. Like that's just gross. But the problem is, and it's mana ramp too. And I'd really like to run it, but I guess in that sense, you know, you could almost say that Sphinx is kind of like, because it's mana ramp, it's kind of more like a signet up here. But in terms of recursion, I put it equal to Timetwister. And the reason I did that was, are you happier, you know, Sphinxing back an Opposition Agent to continue to hold your opponent down, or are you happier just Timetwistering with Hull Breacher and just winning the game, right? Like the fact that you can go, you know, Crypt, Island, Hull Breacher at the end of your turn, untap Timetwister, and the game's over. Like, oops, I just won on turn 2 is insanely stupid. And hopefully, these creatures are just, I feel they're like grossly unhealthy in this format. They just seem ridiculous, right? Like they're completely format warping, but you know, that's okay. That's okay. We're going to adapt. So if you want to be able to do that, if you want to just be able to have a, you know, oh, the only thing I have in my hand is a blue source, a mana crypt, a Hull Breacher, and a Timetwister. I mulligan to 4. And guess what? I killed you on turn 2 off my mulligan to 4. If you want to be able to do that, then you've got to run Timetwister. And I had and I do want to be able to do that. I want that to be an option, right? So like I had been running commit to memory. So I was running commit to memory and thinking that that's pretty cool because, you know, I can commit, I can counter a spell or tuck a permanent, kind of like commit basically replacing Vindicate. You could kind of look at it like the Sphinx replacing a Signet since it often acts as mana, and then commit to memory replacing Vindicate. But then the thing was, to get the Timetwister loop going, like not the loop, but to get the Timetwister effect for Hull Breacher, I would have to spend 4 on commit and 6 on memory, so 10 mana to do what I could do for 3. And after I spent all that mana, the only thing I cared about was the 3 mana effect. The other 7 mana was wasted. I don't care about the counter. I don't care about the tuck. I don't care about paying 6 mana for a 3 mana spell. What I care about is just getting, because if I'm doing the Timetwister effect, I need the Timetwister effect. I either have been mind twisted or something, or I'm in deep doo-doo and I need to like reload my hand and find solutions, or I have a Hull Breacher or a Narset out. And the thing is, with 2 effects like this, to make this just an instant game over, I think that's 2 is 1 too many, and that pushes me towards like, okay, I need to have this effect in my deck. And the ability to just have this in your deck and just, oops, I win any given game. And for you to get like a Narset or a Hull Breacher in play, and for Timetwister, now your opponent has to constantly be like, if they Timetwister, I'm dead. The ability to do that is just so good. That I think not having the card in the deck is the mistake. And so when I contrast that to what Sphinx does, it's a powerful value card. This is just a game over card. That can be a powerful value card because sometimes, you know, you've seen it. You go like first turn land, they go land, and you go end of your turn like tutor of some sort. Next turn you go land, crypt, tap the crypt, play as talisman, tap 3 mana and cast Timetwister. Reload your hand, right? Like, and now they've got 1 land in play and 7 cards at random, and you've got 5 mana in play and 7 cards at random, and guess who wins that? Most of the time it's going to be you, right? Like, you're just going to win. The other thing that Timetwister does, it's kind of weird, but this is really niche, but you should at least keep it in mind, is that Timetwister creates a loop with Mystic Sanctuary that is protected by Crucible of Worlds. So as long as you have one of these 3 cards, so like let's say you don't have Timetwister or Crucible, they're both in the graveyard. As long as you can get the Sanctuary down, you get the Timetwister on top, you Timetwister, you get everything back. Let's say these are 2 gone, you play the Crucible, you replay Sanctuary from the graveyard, that pops out the Timetwister, you play Timetwister, you get everything back. Let's say all you have is, I don't know, I mean, basically you can put it together, but you get the point. And then if you really had to twist again, you kill the because I don't have any way to pick up the Sanctuary, so I don't have like Daze or something like that, Gush or whatever, or Deprive. Deprive probably being the best one, or maybe even Cryptic, like Bounce It. Because I don't have that, you just have to use Crucible and like wasteland your own Sanctuary and then replay it and do it that way. But the reason why that comes up, not too much, but maybe, is there are decks that do try to deck you, and it can be a problem. And that gives you kind of like a little bit of impact against it. The other thing Timetwister does too is it also punishes graveyard-based decks, which I didn't have any way to punish them before, but Timetwister actually, decks that go all in on filling their graveyard up so they can do, like, because there's commanders that like to play with the graveyard, and then Timetwister just undoes all their work and reloads your hand with the more capabilities to disrupt them in the process. And of course it reloads their hand as well. But in a deck that has Winter Orb too, you can sometimes, and of course Mind Twist, you can sometimes twist her either with an orb out or into an orb, or twist her into like a twister into twist. And if you do the twist squared there, you get the cards they don't. But add these 2 cards into the mix, and now you've got like 4 cards that really love Timetwister to some extent, or at least like make it not exact parity, make it feel like it's not parity, or actually don't make it parity. And of course, if your opponent does get like a Necropotence in play, Timetwister is like a way that they've got 7 cards in their hand at all times. So if you Timetwister, like, who cares? That's not they're going from 7 to 7, but you, on the other hand, are refilling your hand. So like having access to that, it's a pretty good thing. It's a pretty good deal. It is Power 9 for a reason. So that's kind of it. I cannot stand this art, but this is the $3 art, and the other art is like $60, and I just can't swing it right now. And the other art in foil is $140 or something. It's totally nuts. So I'm a long way off from that. But anyway, that's it. So I've got a bunch of changes that I made to the deck. The one that bothers me the most is not having access to Doretti, and I feel like I just don't know how to fix that. And so I'm really hoping, not having access to Doretti is bugging me. So I'm really hoping that you have a suggestion. I'm going to unscrew this mess and you can take a look at it again. So hopefully you've got a suggestion for how Doretti, oops, I just mixed in all my cuts. Oh, that was horrible. But hopefully you've got a suggestion for how Doretti is going to, let's get Urborg out of there, fit in here, because wow, that's unfortunate. 3 cards over, and I don't even know what they are off the top of my head because they all look like they belong in the deck. Wow, that was horrible. But yeah, I'd really like to get, oh, well, Doretti's one of them. I'd really like to get this card back in. So I'll need your thoughts on that. And then we'll run through some games here. I actually have Coalition Relic comes out, and then the last card that comes out, it's not a land, so we're at 29. These are all good. So it's got to be somewhere in here. It's hiding somewhere in here. My brain isn't coughing up the cut. I feel like it's, what is the last card that gets cut? Oh, that's brutal. I apologize. It's kind of a weird interruption to what we were doing here. I don't know. That's frustrating. Okay. So my family came home in the background, and I and I was just my brain was like off thinking about that, and then yeah. So anyway, We'll figure out where the last cut is here in a few minutes. I'm sure it will come to me. That's crazy. Um, God, everything looks like it belongs. Anyway, in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run through some games because surely you would like to see some games. And as a matter of fact, since I made these changes, the deck has not lost at all. And I've had some real doozies of a game. So at first, here you can see I was playing Vintage against Brian Weissman, and this was actually we were playing old school. He has a bunch of videos on it right now. Old school Singleton. I was being his test partner under the agreement that I would scoop. I would scoop in the games that I was winning so that he could sort of maintain his record in and use the games that weren't against me as an accurate counter, so that he could actually keep track of how well his deck was doing or how well it wasn't doing, so that he would have better results for his testing. And having me having wins mixed in with losses against me in there, it was just throw everything off. So the results from that we had to record separately, but it allowed for some good testing anyway. And mostly we were actually trying out some deck list that I was playing with. I'll actually bring up the deck list at the very end. If you stick around, that'll be a bonus. I'll throw that on at the end, and I'll show you not what I was using against Brian, but what I actually think I probably something along the lines of what I should be using. And it's the next thing I want to test in the format. But in the meantime, you can see I started the format out. I took a loss here, and then that was when I rebuilt the deck. I was because I had the exact thing happen. I went fetch land, and my opponent flashed out not Hull Breacher, but Opposition Agent, and I was like, all right, F this, I'm out. And I just logged off. It was literally the first game of the day, and I just logged off because it just sucks so bad when that happens. And then I decided that instead of pissing and moaning and being the type of player that I've often said that I don't care for, which is the kind who just whines about a problem, I was like, all right, let me try to solve the problem. So I went back and put together what you saw, and it's actually working quite well. So we'll run through these games and we'll see how it works. So let's get started. Again, keep in mind what you think the ready ought to be. I could so use that card needs to be. Oh well, I guess game one didn't count. I could so use some input on that. Anyway, game two against Doc MC. Some of these will be like that. Some of these might even be. I haven't checked the replays. Some of them might be bugged. But yeah, here we go. If there's anything in here that I adjusted between then and now, I don't think there is, but if there is, I'll point it out, of course. Opponent has this insane Wishclaw Talisman start, and all I've got is this lousy Lightning Bolt. But you know what? I'm feeling really happy that I have the Lightning Bolt, considering this is a Timna deck over there. My opponent's other commander, by the way, Jessica Thrice Reborn, is ridiculous. I really like this pairing, actually, if you're not going to play blue. An answer card and a threat. And Jessica's minus X, you'll see at one point in the game, I don't realize that this deals X damage to 3 targets. I thought it was divided amongst 3, but it's actually X to 3. So it's like a skipped fireball. Totally nuts. But anyway, having Bolt here, obviously making me quite happy. My opponent uses Wishclaw and runs out. I'm pretty sure that's what he Wishclawed forward. Yay, the cheap early removal already doing what it needs to do. I was going to Wishclaw into Opposition Agent and try to bait my opponent, and I naturally drew it, so I get some mana sources out. Opponent plays Timna, and I'm going to have to pass here. Now, I'd really like to get that Timna off the board, so before I tried to do anything tricky with Opposition Agent, I just want to deal with that. So I realized I could play Narset or something and have him start attacking the Narset, but that's not great. The Jace play just generates a lot of tempo for me. And so my opponent replays Timna, and then will allow me to make a Wishclaw Opposition Agent play. So we're going to set up here. Once again, going for tempo, and now I'm going for the setup, and I'm going to just grab Force of Will, because if this doesn't work out, it's going to be really bad for me. So the idea here is Force of Will protect my Opposition Agent when I flash it in. Opponent goes for Praetor's Grasp, though, and I feel like I have to Force of Will it, because So I end up exiling my, hold on, I exile my Teferi because Praetor's Grasp doesn't search their library, it searches mine, and I can't afford to let them go get my Necropotence or whatever, so I just have to force a will it there. And then my opponent uses the opportunity to play Jessica Thrice Reborn and kill my Jace. I never actually got a card with Jace. I got Tempo, but no card. So this kind of sucks. So the trick with the opposition agent here, the problem I have now is that I end up having to flash opposition agent out. My opponent's low on cards in hand, so it's unlikely they have removal. In fact, we know what their card is. It's Timna. But I have to flash the opposition agent out now because there are other things I need to do with my mana for the turn, and I won't have time to do it anymore. So I'm just going to have to sort of like turn their talisman off and hope they don't kill this before I can more permanently address the Wishclaw. So, at the very least, I get to attack their Jessica here, and then I can play a Narset. And remember, I don't correctly understand. And I find Dax, so this is great. I'll steal their talisman, and I'm going to recur the bolt just in case I need to deal with their Timna in their hand. So I'm thinking that I'm in great spot, but I'm not realizing that this is X to 3 targets. What the crap is this card, right? So it actually did 3 to Dax, 3 to Narset, 3 to Opposition Agent. Holy crap. That's insane for 4 mana. Well, 6 in this case. Whoa. Super ridiculous. Anyway, well, nothing doing. I can't really help that. I do give him a tapped out Wishclaw, and then speaking of tapped out, I drew a Tezzeret off the top, so we're going to go right into Orb and hope that it's good enough. I'm hoping, as a matter of fact, that they would do exactly what they just did. Spend some mana on that. Remember, I got the Bolt, and this allows me to bolt their creature, filtering Mana Crypt into a Signet, and then with the remaining mana, I'm going to go for a Mind Twist for 2. Get them down to no cards in hand. They will have 2 mana per turn, but I'll have 4 mana per turn, and Tezzeret will make that 5 and then 6 and so forth. And at that point, my opponent scoops, which is awesome, but really kind of crazy and somewhat rough game there. That commander is savage. It's crazy, like how good that card actually is. Anyway, I've got a gross fast start, but my opponent gets to lead off with Gemstone Caverns, and my fast start is also incredibly risky. So if they kill this here with like a Braid or something, I'm in big trouble. And when they tutor, I'm like, oh, I'm sweating. So I'm going to ET here. So what I need to do is get as much mana in play as I can before they disrupt me to the point that I can't win. So I end up deciding to do it this way. I Spellseeker, and I go get, what do you get? Tithe. This way I have, they're going to probably kill a land, an artifact like a Crypt, which will turn off the Opal, but at least I'll have like some mana and still in the game. And if they don't, like they didn't, and they make that Timna play, well, in that case, I'm really looking good. Having drawn the Hull Breacher is even better, but because now I can run out Breya, now the Mox Opal will stay on even if they kill the Crypt, and of course, if they kill one of my artifacts, I get to sacrifice it for value here. Instead, they just run out Confidant, and as you can see, like I'm not sure what they tutored for, but whatever it is, they're not in great shape here. So we're going to just get even more mana into play. And this is what I mean about Breya. Like, if my opponent had like the black opposition agent, like look how Breya just like sort of shuts it down until it's dealt with. It's super powerful. So opponent's like doing some reanimation shenanigans over there trying to set up something. I'm not exactly clear on what it is, but I'm going to go ahead and kill Dark Confidant. They reanimated Dark Confidant, of course. And then I rip a Yog's Will off the top. So rather than, however, muck about with that, I'm actually, because I drew Will, I actually kill a Thopter in the Mox Opal, because now I have 0 drops in the graveyard that I want, and there's almost certainly the card that my opponent tutored for, and they're right back in the game. But anyway, I want to Yogg Will, and so, and if they were playing blue, I'd be in big trouble. Of course, that encourages me to start putting a lot more pressure on them, on their life total, than I was before. Anyway, so for my turn, I'm going to Impulse, and I actually end up finding a Teferi, and I decide to plus it and untap here because what I want to do is I'm trying to pressure their life total here, and I'm not quite ready. Well, with the silence on the stack, I might as well flash out Hull Breacher. Hopefully they don't clear my board. But they got Dockside Extortionist into Mana Vault into Diabolic Intent into holy smokes, this is going ape. And unfortunately, though, they just kind of ran out of gas. They went crazy, generated tons of mana, were ready to get some bunch of cards, but didn't have anything to do with it that turn. And on the next turn with Teferi, then I can safely like tuck this, will puke all of my graveyard back into play, Vandal Blast all these artifacts off the board, and I think I'm good at that point. So my opponent doesn't know it's coming, but they do know that they didn't really do anything with their turn. Like they got some value plays and stuff, but it just against the pressure that I have going, it's not enough. So 4, 5, 6 comes in, chonks them down to 22. If they necro for 6 here, they actually go down to they would be -6, like to refill their hand. So then they would be at 16, and then 3, 6. So I've got another 6 damage in play that I can throw at them, taking them to 10. So in short order, I might actually just necro lock them. But anyway, they scoop it up. Interesting game there. There's a couple of opponents to scoop, maybe a little prematurely in these games, in my opinion. But what are you going to do? Anyway, so I take a mulligan here, and I'm playing against Krenko, and the reason I mulliganed a hand that looked perfectly keepable is because against Krenko, the way you lose is they run out Soul Ring Krenko or a Lotus Krenko, and you have no answer. But after mulliganing, so into a hand that's fast, I have to consider that good enough. Like, I don't necessarily have an answer for Krenko, but I do have one hiding over here in the command zone. So if I get a big mana hand, then I might be able to get something going soon enough. So I'm going to impulse in response to a spell, only because it just gives me information prior to allowing it to resolve. Pretty sure I was going to let it resolve anyway, but from my opponent's point of view, he's looking for a force of will kind of a deal. Anyway, going to run out Breya here, and hopefully it's going to live. My opponent gets a Goblin Chieftain, but even if this was the Goblin, not Chieftain, but the Goblin who gives the Mountain Walk, I don't actually have a mountain, so I'd be okay. Instead, my opponent trades a Motivator for Jace, which did they hit a Jace, or did they just hit me in the face? I actually missed that. Let's double check. No, they didn't hit a Jace. The Jace is still in my hand. No, they just go face, which is kind of weird. Like throwing away this Motivator, which turns Krenko into this like super scary threat. Under the presumption that the Goblin Chieftain is going to remain in play, when I have a Brea out, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But anyway, so for my turn, I'm going to clamp. And I draw, excuse me, a Skydiver. I'm going to stop right there. I've got 3 mana. If my opponent strip mines me and plays like a Soul Ring into Krenko, I can still activate my commander. Instead, they just run their Krenko. Also, incidentally, this is a super cool land I wasn't even aware of. War Room. Look at this. Pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's identity. Draw a card. It's a Jamday Tome in a land. So they took like a Library of Alexandria and a Jamday Tome, sandwiched them together. And the thing about it is it's kind of a stupid card too. So once again, just like the Lotus, it's rewarding monocolor decks. Like the Lotus is the Commander Lotus is best in monocolor decks. War Room is best in monocolor decks because you're only paying 1 life. I don't know. Maybe that's the point. Maybe they don't like multicolor commander decks. But like one of the draws to the commander format is all the dual lands. Like you want to be able to do all these cool things that you can't do, that the dual lands let you do, that you can't necessarily do in other formats with the same degree of consistency and value. So like punishing what makes the format interesting to me seems foolish, but maybe they have some information I don't have, and that's something they feel needs to happen. I don't know. Anyway, not super worried about it. It is a little bit slow for commanders. So instead of killing Krenko, of course, I kill their chieftain so it doesn't come down with haste. Because if I let it come down and then I try to kill it in response to the activation ability, well, that just doesn't work out for me. Then I'll tutor at the end of their turn, and I just go get, hey, look at that. The ever so affordable Fire Ice. I'm not going to mess around here. I'm just going to kill them right away. And I bounce their Krenko with Jace, and I'm feeling pretty good now. If my opponent does get a Goblin Matron into Goblin War Chief, that was the other one. Goblins you control have haste and are cheap, so okay. But I've got enough mana to play a Tezzeret here, and I just X's 3, grab myself some shackles, and feeling pretty good here. My opponent can dink my Tezzeret or my Jace, but if they do what they just did and play their commander or their war chief prior to attacking, then they can't do either one. So if they had attacked with the matron at the Tezzeret, I probably steal to protect Tezzeret anyway, which means that they can get their war chief down. But if they play war chief like they did, I'm just going to steal and block because I don't actually, once again, they don't have mountain walk over here, so it's irrelevant. But even if they did, I don't have mountains. I was actually keen on not putting any mountains into play to the best of my ability, specifically once I realized that they were playing goblins. So Just something to keep in mind. All right, so moving against Dan Pesci 94, and my opponent's commander is Grenzo, which is always a big problem. And look at exactly this insane hand I have. It's not perfect. I'm missing a land. I really need a land, and I'm missing a blue card for Force of Negation because I don't want to force the Hull Breacher or Twister. Like, this is weird, but if Mind Twist was a blue card, I would actually be more likely to Mind Twist my opponent than if Mind Twist is a black card, because I would have Force of Negation to force with the Mind Twist. So my opponent clearly is having a little problem with not having red mana over there. I'm going to take advantage of that. At least I can hardcast the Force of Negation, so I'm just going to run out the Lotus with that in mind, and then see what my opponent does. Because if they don't do anything, well, we're going to flash out that, untap, and yeah, I'm going to go for it. So I'm going to play Sensei's Divining Top, float, mana. This is probably, Timetwister kind of messes up the replays often. Okay, you're not going to get to see, of course, what happened, but I think I played Sensei's Divining Top, and then I Enlightened Tutor. I had 2 mana floating. I Enlightened Tutor for something. I can't remember. Or I may have taken a peek with Sensei's Divining Top to find a blue card so that I could Timetwister, and then if they had like, I don't know, Terror or something, then I could tap the top, and I wouldn't have been able to force. I don't know what I was doing here. More than likely, I was Enlightened Tutoring for something that I could play, and then tap the top, and then put that card into play, and then burn the Timetwister here. But at any rate, I twistered. It resolved. I got 7 treasures. My opponent got nothing. I then used the treasures to unload, and my opponent scooped. They could have scooped, right? Treasures or no treasures, they could have scooped. But of course, being able to not just break their back, but also grind their face in it with the treasures afterwards is just ridiculous. Hull Breacher's stupid. But there you go, Timetwister kill. So yeah, I'm all again, and end up once again we're playing against Grenzo, and his hand once again is a little bit questionable, but it's got so much potential. Again, I can't. If you cannot keep these hands with potential, then you've got to change your deck somehow. But you pretty much need to be able to. The disruption. You need to be able to. So I'm going to look for a Force of Negation or a Force of Will here, and I'm going to not find either one of them. But I do get a Signet, so I'm still in the game. But anyway, if you can't afford, if you can't afford to keep hands like that, your deck construction is not good, right? You've got to be able to keep hands like that. Weirdly, my opponent runs out Nim, Deathmantle, and Grenzo instead of just playing Grenzo and Activate, which gives me the chance to stall. So I'm going to do that. Excuse me. Opponent is then playing Ashnod's Altar and doesn't play Grenzo again. Totally don't understand, but I appreciated all the tempo they were giving me. So now I'm going to Spellseeker and go grab a Mana Drain and call it good. I suppose I could have done that off Merchant Scroll, but I was trying to use my mana efficiently. It did put the risk of a Wasteland here disrupting this play, but yeah, I Mana Drain their Grenzo, and then they just play it again, I believe. Yeah. But the other reason I kept Merchant Scroll is because it allowed me to. I had this play in mind, which was well, not the Narset. The Narset's going to look for options, and I end up finding a Swords of Plowshares, so I end up changing my play. Now this is weird. My opponent sacks, which triggers the Nim Deathmantle, which they can't pay for, but then they sack for mana to activate their guy, and they activate their guy. Like they click on it to activate it, and then it says, "How do you want to pay the mana?" And then they sacrifice the creature to activate it. So they ended up hitting a Reanimate and not a creature, but super funky. Didn't really get that you could do that with Ashnod's Altar. So they can click on Grenzo, say, yeah, I want to use you, and then it says, how do you want to pay for it? And it says, well, I'll sacrifice myself. And then it will use the Grenzo ability, which was crazy. Anyway, this was what I had in mind earlier, was just fire off of the Merchant Scroll. And then, of course, my opponent uses it again. They miss once again. Totally changes the way that the game plays out. Now I've got Mystical Tutor here. Now notice what I have in play. I have Narset in play. And what does that mean? Well, it means that unlike in the past, I don't need to worry about, do I want to go Demonic Tutor for, Necropotence or whatever. I just instantly win the game, right? So I plus up to fairy during my opponent's draw step. After they've drawn their card, I'm going to time twister, and that's it. They have no cards in hand, and I now drew 7. And I can do it again off a Snapcaster. So having Time Twister in this deck, because of those 2 cards, has proven to be super, super powerful. I think like this is probably not changing now. This is just stupid. And, that's what we're here to do, play stupid things. And beat people with them until they get banned or we do, I guess. All right, Damian Smith is the next opponent. And Damian Smith is playing Nekusar the Mind Razor. I remember him saying something about my opponent had a sense of humor. When it comes up, I'll point it out. Anyway, early on, you almost always want to fetch Ralgren Triome if you can. Works really nice with the Badlands, of course. And then, all right, we're throwing away Mystic Sanctuary because I've got a 4-mana play here that I'd like to make, which is a Factor Fiction. Opponent splits it up. I haven't played a land yet. They give me choice of 2 counter spells or more mana and a Mind Twist. I'll take more mana and a Mind Twist for 100, please, Alex. And then at the end of my opponent's turn, my opponent just taps out for Myriad Landscapes. I don't even have to think twice about this play. And okay, I'm just going to run Tezzeret into play and Mind Twist you a different way rather than worry about the Mind Twist. Now I can do it at my leisure. Tezzeret's going to produce more mana. And hey, how many cards do you have in your hand? Was it 7? Well, how about let's make it 1? And my opponent discards a Windfall. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's one of those decks. My opponent could just top deck Wheel of Fortune and be right back in this game. Fair enough. All right. They are having problems, of course, with their lack of blue mana there. So now that I understand that my opponent can certainly get back into this game, I'm going to play it a little bit more carefully and less cavalierly and get a counterspell board. Now remember, if I want to, I can sacrifice the... I need to get Tezzeret up to 3, but I can go get a Crucible and then use that to get the Mystic Sanctuary and use that to get the Mind Twist all over again. But in the meantime, I've got Sword of Feast and Famine, and who cares? So we're just going to slowly Mind Twist our opponent, and my opponent gets an Echo of Aeons. So I just decide, you know what? Time to Demonic Tutor here, and we'll just go grab Hull Breacher. My opponent on their turn runs out a Nekusar, and I don't even, that's not a problem at all for me. It's already answered in play, so I'm going to use Nekusar's additional draw to Mystical Tutor into Time Twister. And once again, it's a zero effort plays here. I'm just going to map my opponent, strip mine their land, attack, get all my mana back, float a couple of mana, resolve the sword, use the mana that I was floating to play the Hull Breacher, use the Jitte counters to kill their commander, and cast a Time Twister, and now I still have 7 cards in hand, and my opponent's 0, and they're under a Winter Orb with no mana sources. And oh, by the way, I have 7 treasures in play. I mean, obviously, like, this is over, but my opponent says, I hope you don't think that'll keep Nekusar down for long, which I thought was a pretty amusing response to what's going on here. Of course, this is just kicking your opponent while they're down, which I'm happy to do. So I play all the cards that I can play, and then I oh, by the way, I target my opponent with Dak Faden, which produces 2 more treasures from the Hull Breacher, makes them discard. So Dak Faden is now a Soul Ring that discards. And I go ahead and tutor up Opposition Agent and put that into play too. I'm just charging up Tezzeret here and running through the motions with my deck as fast as I can. I still don't have actually a counterspell in my hand, so like if it weren't for the fact that my hand is like that the board is insane, there's some world where my opponent would I don't know, Wheel of Fortune and go off like with their Storm deck. But of course, in order for them to do that, they would have to get through the Hull Breacher, and that ain't happening. So anyway, I never make it to Tezzeret because I realized that all those treasures also happen to be fuel for Breya, and my opponent's life total was quite low, and so I just shoot him with Breya and keep some Jitte counters instead of removing him to kill him. Like the game was over on the Time Twister. I mean, the game was over before that most likely, but the Time Twister is just a complete nail in the coffin. So everything after that was simply rehearsal, deck play rehearsal. So that's basically 3 Time Twister kills, one of which was redundant, we'll say, since I already had the Winter Orb thing going, but 2 of which were were legit kills with Timetwister. And it feels dirty, but I can live with myself. So anyway, and my opponent's running Tonker 2K7 here is playing a interesting commander I hadn't actually seen before. It's this Tayum Luminous Enigma, and so it's like a recursion counter, which will actually make Timetwister decent potentially. I generate lots of mana and put some faith in my deck, and my deck rewards me by finding a Guild Lotus. My opponent runs out an Autumn's Veil, so I did not want to counter anything with Muddle the Mixture here. I kind of regretted starting that fight there. I almost wish I had lost the fight because I wanted to be able to tutor up a Necro here and then just win, but instead I'm going to have to play Containment now, so I use my Commander and my Crypt to kill their Bird and their Mystic and then replay my Commander and sit for a little bit. My opponent runs out Earthcraft. Oh, that turns their guy in play into a mana source, so once again I'm going to kill my Breya. I've got so much, I'm so flooded that it's just value for me. And run Breya right back into the battlefield again. And Earthcraft means that if they get Squirrel Nest, I believe it is, they can go infinite. They can produce infinite creatures. You can look up the combo if you're interested. But basically, you put it on a basic land that taps to produce a squirrel. Then you tap the squirrel to untap the basic land. And then you tap the basic land to produce a squirrel and blah, blah, blah. So I'm still playing the containment game. I haven't found any refill yet. Oh, wait. There it is, Stoneforge. And you'd think, like, why am I attacking here? I could play Stoneforge and grab Sword of Feast and Famine or something. No. I need gas, right? If I can redraw my hand before my opponent, then I've got him. And, of course, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now that I have Necropotence, I don't need to worry too much about reloading my hand, so I can focus on unloading theirs first. And my opponent actually has a response to Fairy's Protection, essentially acting as a counterspell right here. Until your next turn, your life total can't change. You gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out. So didn't see that coming. And then they run out Felidar Retreat, which if you're playing Standard, I think is a big deal. And it's actually a pretty nutty card. The power creep is just real in these formats. But fortunately, the old cards still do some work, right? Like I just drew 7 for 3 black. Anyway, opponent's getting some Cat Beasts still. And also pay attention to their Sanctum, which now produces 2 mana. They're running out some plays. I'm going to let them have this Isochron Scepter. They put Wax Wayne under it and target my Necro. But here's the thing. I'm not willing to counterspell because Earthcraft means they can win the game at any point. And I'm not willing to take the risk. So I'll just set aside some cards for Necro and let all this other stuff that I don't like happen in order to protect my position. I will flash out a Hull Breacher end step because they can't like flash out a Squirrel Nest or whatever. And I'm digging. I'm looking for a solution. Now remember, I don't have Vindicate and I don't have Disenchant, so it's going to be a lot harder for me to answer some of these threats that my opponent has in play. But I do find a Muddle the Mixture, which I transmute into a Thieving Skydiver. And then Thieving Skydiver, which is not Disenchant, steals Isochron Scepter, which has Wax Wayne under it, which does have Destroy Target Enchantment imprinted on it. So I just now have a reusable Disenchant for enchantment. Some opponent says something about it being pretty gross. But anyway, then the trigger from the Necrobones, which is dead, still happens, and I dump a bunch of extraneous mana sources. I'm not sure what's up with their commander, so I'm just kind of stalling while I do have the mana to do it. And I'll plow their Cat Beast. Incidentally, my opponent's deck is a cat-based... Oh, no, it's not a cat-based deck. That was the next guy. Anyway, I spoiled it. But first thing I'm going to do is take Earthcraft off the board. Felidar Retreat provides slow value, and Earthcraft's doing nothing. But at any time, Earthcraft can just instantly win the game. And Felidar Retreat does not have the same pedigree. So I'm not super worried about small value plays. Besides, I've got this going. Attack, sack, dead. With, 4 counterspell backup. So, or 3. So, pretty good stuff. Managed to beat the Tonker 2K47 there, and I believe, or 2K7 there, and I believe, I think it was Tonker who had said that he was interested in potentially subscribing to the channel, which is pretty cool. If you did, thank you very much, by the way. It was an interesting game, and welcome. Anyhow, The next one is Gopnik Mama, and Gopnik Mama is running Miri Weatherlight Duelist, which this was the cat-based deck. Yeah, I didn't figure it out till a few turns in, but I thought that was pretty cool. And opponent plays Kuzali Pride Mage. It's kind of a pain in my butt, actually. And because Rauger and Triumph was the first land out of my hand, I can't actually play Tomb and have an opposition agent ready to go. So instead, what I'm going to do is just mana drain their commander here, only because it's early pressure and I'm not quite sure that I want to deal with that pressure. And I have Fierce Guardianship in hand. Opponent plays a Stalking Leonin. If you don't know what it does, like I didn't, they can exile a creature, one of my creatures, if it's attacking them, is the bottom line. So if I attack with like Breya and a Thopter, they can exile Breya. If I attack with just a Thopter, they can exile the Thopter. If I attack with just Breya, they can exile Breya, and so forth. And then they've also got Kuzali Pride Mage. Now, part of the reason I actually ran out the Breya here on the turn that I played the Signet was that I actually need the Signet. If you notice, it's my only source of black for that agent, and of course for Breya, and I have Tomb hiding in my hand. So if they kill the Breya, which is what I want them to do with their Pride Mage, I can just play a land, recast it. I've still got Guardianship and Force of Will up. But if they kill the Signet, I do have my Breya, so I still have Fierce Guardianship and Force up, but I lose access to opposition agent, and I'm kind of like slowed down a bit. I don't really mind too much because I'll probably be okay if they kill the Signet, but I'm actually better off if they kill the Breyas, so that was part of the reason. And then the other part is I don't like getting hit in the face, so there's that. But anyway, when they don't do anything like that, I go ahead and just play Narset and take a dig. Factor Fiction, which I'm happier to Force a Will with than the Narset once Narset's in play. And I'm going to sit, and my opponent doesn't kill Breya or the Signet, which means that I get to flash out the opposition agent if I want to. And after thinking about it, I decide a better play is as soon as they tapped out, I'm going to kill their Sully Pride Mage. My turn, I'm going to Factor Fiction. And they don't know that I have the extra lands in hand and whatnot, so I'm able to take advantage of the fact and really get some things on the board, get things going here. I am off opposition agent for a moment, but my opponent's also down to 3 cards, and I have 2 counter spells, so probably good. They play Cathar's Crusade, which allows creatures to grow as they play more creatures, and I don't want to. I can't actually counter every dang creature that they play. I don't want to have to try, so I just deal with the Cathar's Crusade. One of them plays a 4/5 cat. Interesting card. Whenever one or more non-human creatures they control deal damage to a player, draw a card. So if they can damage himself or me, they get to draw a card. Anyway, at the end of their turn, I'm going to get this Leonin off the board, which is preventing me from attacking. But mostly, I just don't want the threat in play, and then we'll leave these 2 in play. But I also need the extra tokens from my commander. And with all the mana that I have, this is just a fine play. So I'm still sandbagging the opposition agent as a sort of something I can play in a pinch. But notice I am low as far as counter magic goes. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp and draw some more cards and fix that problem too. And then waste their temple, which feels really nice. And go ahead and put a clamp on the Stoneforge as a deterrent from attacking, leaving Gilded Lotus untapped. I don't play Necro here. My hand is fine. I'll get more cards in my hand later. It just gives me the ability to flash out opposition agent or Force a Will and pay for a tithe, or do this: block, sack the Breya and the expedition map, I think is what I sack. Yeah, and kill their other creatures. So my Narset lives, and then my opponent just replays their commander. No problem. I'll do the same. I've got the trump card, which is the Breya for most commanders at any rate, thankfully. All right, and then I just kill their commander on the spot and pass. Opponent plays Rampant Growth, and in response, I flash out opposition agent. They don't scoop. It's the first time my opponent is not scooped to an opposition agent, and it's probably because it's a Rampant Growth on like turn 14 or whatever it is instead of turn 2, which would be a scoop. But I still get a free land, and I'm going to get Teferi down, bounce their guy, play Dak Faden, and I target them with Dak Faden. Because I have Narset in play, it forces them to draw 1 and discard 2. They discard a flash creature. I was sad to see that, because I would have loved to have them discard something different than flash that out and have it get bolted. On their turn, they play a cat, but I had, at some point I had a Shackles out here, so I'm just going to continue to get into my opponent's hand with Dak Faden, Narset combo, and steal a cat. Run out Winter Orb, and then throw down Necro and reload my hand. And of course, I have Hull Breacher Narset prevents them from drawing, so I wouldn't get, if I played Hall Breacher, I wouldn't get treasures, so it's not a mistake to do the Dak Faden thing the way that I'm doing it. Anyway, and of course at this point the game's over, right? We're just in. I'm stealing all their stuff, nuking their hand. They've got no mana. I've got a hand that's very, very blue, and I'm going to go ahead and go for the win here ASAP. So right now we're just building up mana into play and grabbing counter magic and setting up for next turn, which will be lethal, attacking and passing. So now I've got every planeswalker under the sun just about, except for Duretti, who's not in my deck, darn it, into play. And I go ahead and shuffle because I know the top cards are crap. So I use Mystical Teachings to get Fire Ice. And Fire Ice, as I said, you get to... It's totally unnecessary here, but I'm going to go ahead and just recharge my mana base with Fire Ice on the Winter Orb. I might as well use the Sensei's Divining Top, untap everything, and then, of course, hit my opponent's last card in hand, and then, yeah. That's close to lethal for 2 players. So anyway, yeah, opponent goes from 24 to neg 36. Seems good. And of course we have Breya. We could push that even further by throwing more damage. So that really would potentially kill 2 players, which is cool. And then we got this game against Life Loss. Life Loss here proves to be an incredibly powerful opponent, and this is great because I advertise it as CADH now. I've specifically put that in my tagline to help hopefully make better videos by encouraging the right type of opponents to play and to reduce hurt feelings by people that did not read between the lines when it came to my previous tagline, which said abandon hope, all ye who enter here. So I now say, CEDH videos, and it has like my hyperlink to my YouTube. But, Life Loss came in prepared and ready to play some CEDH and give me a serious run for my money here in both games. So it's playing Jace. Always dangerous, Mono Blue is. Of course, having Force of Will and a Dark Confidant, feels pretty good. It's a good way to start a game. My opponent, unfortunately, has Get Probed, so I do get probed, and they get information. So I'm going to have to do my best to play around that, but I'm not willing to Force of Will a Gitaxian Probe when I have turn 2 Dark Confidant backed up by Force of Will, which is more important. Right, so if they ran out like Shackles here, I want to stop it. I'd love to Force of Will a Soul Ring, but they have way too much mana over there, and I can't risk it. Dark Confidant needs to stay in play for me to win this game. Like, that's how I win this game, so I forced to protect it. I hit Vamp and think long and hard and decide not to Vamp, and then I draw Demonic Tutor and decide, okay, I will Demonic Tutor, however. And I'm going to swing in for a little bit of damage, and my opponent goes for a Jace use. It doesn't flip, so I let it happen. After they make their decision, I let them know that it's dead. I did not before. Might have been a mistake, but I don't know. We'll see. Opponent just replays, and then with the last of their mana goes for a Frantic Search. Of course, I'm not going to counter that. That's going to give them one less card in hand, which I like. They run out of Vault, which I don't like, and then they run out a big Timetwister. Not the one that I knew they had, not the Echo Vans in their graveyard, so they have another Timetwister coming. I have a Mind Twister, but it won't stop the one in their graveyard, especially with Jace. Like, I can't stop. So I'm thinking really hard here, like, how do I do this? Because I can't stop Timetwister effects. So I decide, well, you know what? I'm just going to Vamp and do this. Right, because I can't counterspell. If I counterspell it, they just use Jace to replay it, and I end up in a bad way. So my opponent draws. I'm going to let this part happen. They shrink Dark Confidant. All this is fine, and then they're going to go for Echo Vans. Not fine. So they have one card in hand. Is it a counterspell? No, but it's a freaking bounce spell. Now I'm going to pause. I could have bounced in response. I could have bounced in response by sacking a land and then bounce like their Jace, for example, which they would then Timetwister it into their deck. But if I do that, they could sack a land and bounce my Confidant. And having my Confidant is more important than them having their Jace, so I don't bother flashing back the chain. Plus, I need more mana, and they don't. They've got spare mana, and I don't have that. So opponent then runs out a Felwar and a Spellseeker and goes and gets Transmute Artifact. So tons of pressure here. Luckily, I do draw Mana Leak there, and I have Necro, which means that I actually don't... I've got a way to reload, so like I just need to focus on trying to get control of this game as best as I can. So the first way is they go -2, I go +2 mana off a Dak Faden play there, so 4 mana transition is pretty good for me there. Now my opponent knows I have mana leak, so they might do like transmute artifact, but once again, Git probe gives them full information. Sigh. And then they're going to swing into Dak, and because I have Necro, I'm going to go ahead and just protect Dak Faden with Dark Confidant. Dak Faden's clearly good here. Opponent runs out transmute artifact, excuse me. And I do not attempt to counter it. Remember, they do have full information here. I'm trying to be cautious here. I make what I feel is a mistake in hindsight, but I make a main phase play here, so I go for a Mind Twist, and my opponent has Fierce Guardianship. Okay, well, I have a counterspell. They know I have a counterspell, so what is this all about? Well, I counter, and they have Flusterstorm. God dog it. All right, last mana. That Flusterstorm can't be stopped, and I can't force a negation even if I could, so that's not going to happen. So Mana Leak is good there, I guess, to get that out of their hand, and maybe Force of Negation will protect me from losing the game this turn, but it's not looking good. Opponent Merchant scrolls and goes and gets Intuition. The Intuition, I have to let this happen, I think. I'd love to force it, but I just gotta let it happen. And if they get cards that they can flash back, it's just so bad. So they get Snapcaster, Mystic Remora, and Mind's Desire. So they don't have enough mana to cast Mind's Desire this turn. So of the 3 cards, if I put Snapcaster or Mystic Remora in there, if I put Mystic Remora in their hand, I'm in big trouble. I have to force a will that thing. And it's so cheap that they can make other plays this turn. This is not good for me at all. If I put Snapcaster in their hand, it's still really bad for me. So they could use their Jace to replay Transmute Artifact or something, and then or Merchant Scroll or Intuition, like, and then they can use Snapcaster to play another one. It's just too good. So the card I have to give them here is Mind's Desire, which means that they can use Jace, they can -3 it, and make one of these plays here, and then I can force a will the thing. I mean, I can force a negation the thing, and then use Necro to try to get back into the game. But and then they would have a Mind's Desire with 2 other unknown cards, but they wouldn't be able to do like a gigantic Mind's Desire, which would be the problem. On my turn, I can run out Necropotence and then just draw I'll draw like 10, 15 cards, 16, 17 cards, just to make sure that I get defenses against the Mind's Desire turn. And then from there, I have Dak Faden like constantly ticking up, improving my hand as we go. And as soon as I have a way to deal with Spellseeker, Dak Faden will just steal the Reservoir, and then that threat goes away as well. So I actually was in a commanding position, but my opponent actually said that they had to go because, like, I guess it was dinner or something. They had other engagements that they had to attend to. So I ended up not getting to get to the conclusion of this game, but it's okay, because Life Loss does come back after their break. So we'll hit these other 2 games, we'll hit Life Loss, and then we'll call it good. This is Kake in your mouth. Kaka. Got it. Kaka in your mouth. Okay. So, well, this is more like Kaka in your deck. So anyway, I'm playing against Phylath, World Sculptor, and I have a very good start, so I'm just going to sit on this. And I think about the Lotus Cobra, but I've got Toxic Deluge, and unless my opponent runs out unless they run out Planeswalker here, I'm actually better off if I just make the play that I made here and just run out Necro, let them use the Cobra to play hopefully a bunch of creatures, and then I'll just punish them. Or if they play one big creature, I've got the punish in the form of swords. So what I want to do, though, ideally, if you have swords and Deluge, what you're trying to do is let your opponent commit like they just did, Deluge, and then plow the follow-up. Some people will plow early for tempo and then to protect their life and stuff, but in this format, you've got the life, so use it. So just let them develop, sweep, and then sweep the leg, and then finish them. All right, so my opponent then plays Valakut Exploration. I hadn't even seen this card before. This is ridiculous. So whenever they make landfall, they get to play the top card of their library, and if they don't, they get to ding me for damage. That's insane, right? Like, especially with a fetch land. But I mean, in general, that's just a crazy card. But there's kind of nothing I can do about it, so I'm just gonna kind of set up and keep going. I do at least get Winter Orb down so that it will be very hard for them to play the top card. So I'll be taking extra damage here, like that Gravity Well that they hit. I have no idea why that's in there. Anyway, I'll be taking extra damage, but at least my opponent will be struggling to play the cards that they're finding with the Valakut Exploration. And since you have to play a land to trigger the landfall, it's not too bad because they're not going to be able to play extra lands off the top unless they have something that allows them, like a fast bond, to play multiple lands per turn. So seems pretty good. Anyway, my opponent plays the Burnish chart, and I do have Plow, but I actually decide not to. I'm actually going to let my opponent attack Narset and pass because I have Thieving Skydiver, and what I intend to do is if they untap a land and play a land, then I'll probably Plow the Heart and hope that they tap 3 mana and lock themselves under Winter Orb. But if they untap and they don't do that, if they do anything different, I'm going to let the Heart hit Narset, and then I'm going to Thieving Skydiver, steal it, put the Jitte on it, and start beating my opponent's face in, and that'll counteract the damage I'm taking, the bonus damage from that and from this. But instead, my opponent just, I guess, I don't know what they drew. Maybe they drew no lands, but they just give up on the spot. And we move on to the next game, and the Meek Mills ends up being my opponent. And the Meek Mills, did they play it out? Yeah. Is playing Sliver Overlord and leads off with an Ancient Ziggurat, and I lead off with I keep a 1-land hand, but it's got tons of ramp, tons of potential. It's worth the risk, and I lead off with a first turn Mana Vault, and I find land. Going second, that hand's a keeper. Going first, it's really, really sketchy, but it might be a keeper. Probably was, because I could have vaulted into Signet into copy and still got something going. But with this here, my opponent missed a land drop, and I didn't, going second, and now the game's over. Had they not conceded here, of course, I tapped a Gil Lotus for 3 blue. Do I tap it for 3 blue? In this one circumstance, I might actually tap it for 3 white, and I play Signet. I guess it wouldn't matter. Yeah, I tap it for 3 blue and play the Copy Artifact. Then I have 1 blue floating and an untapped Lotus. Tap it, play a Signet, and set up for an Enlightened Tutor, or just Fact or Fiction on the spot. So that's one way to go. The other way is I tap the thing for 3, play the Signet, filter the mana into the Signet, copy the Lotus, sit on the Lotus, have a Vandal Blast Fact, ET at the end of my opponent's turn, I ET, and I go get Necro. Probably the second route actually makes more sense, so that's probably what I would have done, but we didn't get to see it happen. And then lastly is the game against Life Loss, in which my opponent is attempting to give me a game loss. And my opponent has, yet again, their J stack, and it's very good. I have to mulligan. My opponent also mulligans, but once again, I have Mr. Anti-Blue here, Dark Confidant, and with that in mind, and the Preordain over there, I take the risk of keeping, and I choose to get, because I have Arcane Signet, I actually choose to get a red source, because if I don't hit my land drop, the only way I stay in this game if my opponent does play like a Soul Ring is I have to Vandal Blast it. Fortunately, we didn't have to worry about that, so I get the Arcane Signet, Workshop, Confidant, and pass, and it looks like that's what my hand was the whole time, right? Opponent has their 3rd land and doesn't really have anything going, so I am now drawing off of Dark Confidant and get a Talisman of Creativity out and go ahead and fetch. I'm going to go ahead and I don't want them to spend mana to cast like Thirst for Knowledge. It is a risk if they have like a mana drain here, but if they have just a regular counterspell, getting Breya on board right now is really good for me. I don't attack with Confidant because I don't feel like trading him in for a Snapcaster Mage. My opponent pitches a Windfall, which is a little weird, then runs out a Soul Ring, Brainstorms, Signets, Chain of Vapors, my Breya, once again not going to sack, and then runs out Baral with 1 card in hand. Very strange, but scary. I do draw a mana drain there, but I kind of want to get that Soul Ring over on my side of the board, and I want to get Baral off the table. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Attack. Opponent's going to take it. I suppose I should have sent in the Dark Confidant. I should have bolted the Baral, but instead I wait. I don't know why I waited here. This was a mistake. I should have bolted the Baral, and then they wouldn't actually have been able to make this play here, but I don't, so they get to keep going with their turn. They get to run out a... They have a flip Jace now, an Heuristic Study, and 5 cards in hand. Oh, the Heuristic I can deal with thanks to the Soul Ring I stole off of the Thieving Skydiver, but yuck. That was dumb. I should have bolted the... I should have bolted the Brawl, and also got in with the Confidant for some extra damage. Of course, I'm going to pay for the Heuristic Study, and I can attack and pressure their Jace pretty good. I don't send in the 0-1 Dark Confidant for any number of reasons. Anyway, my opponent ponders, so that Jace will get off the board soon, and they go for a Mystic Remora. I don't want that in play, but I'm going to Teachings in Response and pay for the Rhystic Study. And the reason I do this is Hullbreacher doesn't trigger the Remora, only the Rhystic Study. So I'm going to get the Hullbreacher, and then I don't have to worry about those cards too much. Because I drew Lotus here, I make what turns out to be a bad play, which is I play cards in my main phase when I should have waited and then made these plays during my opponent's upkeep. But they do have 2 mana tapped right now, so I go for it. I go Hull Breacher, my opponent mana drains. But remember, I can't force a negation on my turn, so this is a little sketchy. So I play a Remand, pay for the... I can't pay for the Remora, so they get a card. Pay for the Rhystic Study, though, and I Remand Hull Breacher back to my hand. And then I pay for this Rhystic. And then I end up having to discard, so I throw away extra land there. All right, so I can force a negation on their turn and pay for the Study, and I'm going to have to do that. So I force the Windfall and pay. My opponent's going to draw a card off of the Remora. They have now tapped extra lands, but they've already drawn multiple cards off that card, and then they personal tutor. So this was such an interesting game. They personal tutor for Recurring Insight. I'm not sure I agree with that when you know I'm trying to shove a Hull Breacher down your throat, but maybe. Anyway, at the end of their turn, once again, I'm going to go ahead and get Ragran Trio, I believe. Yep. So we don't draw it and find ourselves unable to play it. I draw out a Braid, which is really nice, and a Soul Ring, which is really nice. Soul Ring, it's an amazing card that's always good at every point in the game. So I'm going to go ahead and play Hull Breacher and pay. I don't have to pay for Remora because it's a creature. And now I don't have to pay for my cards at all. So I'm just going to play Soul Ring. Would you like to draw and give me treasures? My opponent wisely chooses no. And no and no. So now I can run out my Gilded Lotus safely. Now remember, I know they have that card draw spell in there. First of all, they've got to deal with Hull Breacher. But secondly, if I get my hand low, well then what's it going to do? That's my thought, but on the other hand, if I get Necro out and I Necro for a bunch, then what are they going to do? So I was thinking, is it better to keep my hand low and the chance that they bounce the Thieving Skydiver, or is it better to Necro for value here and then try to fight over the Hull Breacher staying in play? So if their hand is like bounce and the card draw spell, and I decide, because I could keep my hand low and then the card draw spell doesn't do anything. But you know what? I've got Necropotence in play. Let's do it. Let's do it up. So I'm just going to over Necro here for a bit. It's a little sketchy with my life total, but I don't have anything in play that's going to damage. I don't have Crypt or Vault. I don't have Ancient Tomb, and reloading my hand just seems too perfect. Now all I need is any counter spell, and I'm good. And I find absolutely no counter magic at all. So, oh crap. All right, so I'm going to discard down, throwing away cards that I don't think I'm going to need a Toxic Deluge this game with me at 7 life and a Necro and having all the board presence. Now the good thing is at least Opposition Agent won't trigger their Mystic Remora, but my opponent it would trigger their Rhystic Study, so I have to do it in response. But my opponent lets their Remora go because paying for it doesn't make any sense, and then they run their card draw out, not realizing what's going to happen, and Hull Breacher gets them, and I get 7 tokens, and then we get the Shame Concede, the whoops, and he scoops it up. So up until that point in both games, it seemed like it was pretty perfectly played and very, very threatening. And opponent only had 1 card in hand, so if that card was a bounce spell, this was a major misplay. If it wasn't a bounce spell, if it was like a counter spell or whatever, then honestly, all they could have really done is draw and pass, and at the end of their turn, I flash out Opposition Agent, because if they counterspell Opposition Agent, I don't care at all. Given the board state that I have, I'd rather have that happen. And of course, on my turn, I would Dak Faden, attempt to Dak Faden, and then Dak Faden them with Hull Breacher, which would produce multiple treasures and make them dump their hand. So, I mean, I was in a great situation here, but it was a gnarly battle. And of course, without a counterspell, it's not a perfect situation, but it was a pretty good one for me. But a super good battle there. Opponent did manage his multiple. The deck is like just loaded to the brim with Timetwisters and quite difficult. I don't know where they were exactly trying to go with it, but I didn't want to find out. Wherever they were trying to go, I didn't want them to get there. So managed to hold them off long enough to get the win. And once again, I'm staring at a deck that is exactly 1 card larger than it should be. And I still, there it is. That's the one. Indicate. There we go. And so at the end of the day, this is the final deck list. I'm interested in your thoughts whether or not, I mean, if you think about the cuts, Vindicate, Disenchant, Doretti, like these are some really powerful cards that I've cut, or very efficient cards in the case of like Disenchant. And I'd be interested in your thoughts. Let me know if you see a slot for the Doretti. I think of all of the cards that are cut, Doretti is probably the one that makes the most sense. And I'd really like to fit it back in here. It's just super value with Breya. It does like everything you want. It kills mana dorks. It kills mana artifacts. It kills everything. It produces cards for Skull Clamp. It produces cards for Brea. It produces colorless blockers against Sword of Feast and Famine and cards like that. Hell of a card. Just not sure how to. I'm just not sure how to find the space. So let me know if you see the slot for it. But until then, that's all I've got. This video has been very long. Hopefully I did not. Hopefully I did entertain you rather, and you stuck with it. But if you didn't, I don't blame you. Either way, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. However, having said that, I did have the one bonus that I wanted to throw in at the end, which was the freeform old school singleton. What I think might actually be, if not the best deck, but certainly it should be tier one if you can make it work. So we'll see. And this is my actual attempt at a old school singleton deck with cards that I have considered and have not necessarily put in. Hanging out over here, Stormseeker, if you don't know, deals damage to your opponent equal number of cards in their hand. Hurricane is just Earthquake for flyers. Pyrotechnics is just good burn, and Shatter is just good artifact kill. But if you take a look at it, this is kind of what I was thinking for the old school, with the possibility that Guardian Beast, I hate these stupid lines around the edge. Guardian Beast is a combo, if you don't know, with Chaos Orb. You can actually get a Chaos Orb in. It'll just say that it's not available online. You can still go for quantity 0, not collectible, and then you can find Chaos Orb because you will have 0 of this non-collectible card. But that's how you do it. And then what happens with Guardian Beast is that Chaos Orb does not destroy itself, so you can flip over and over and over and continuously kill things potentially. But this feels pretty nasty to me. It's got tons of acceleration. It's got like fast spawn, Wheel of Fortune effects. It's got the best threats in the format: Kurdape, Serendib, Urnum Jin, some of the best threats, Juggernaut, Suchi. It gets to run Mishra's Workshop and cheat a bunch of mana into play. It's got Vault, Black Vice combined with Winter Orb and Howling Mine, Copper Tablet. It's got the Chaos Orb Guardian Beast combo. You've got Anka Mishra. And then you get ATOG when your cards become a problem, a couple of cheap counters to interrupt, Unstable Mutation, a bunch of direct damage spells, and you've got Berserk. So you can like Bloodlust Berserk and just deal insane. Like Bloodlust is +4, -4, but it won't shrink. It won't kill a creature, so it'll bring its toughness down to 1. So you could, for example, you can do something like Kurdape, and then you Bloodlust that guy, and if you have a Forest out, it's a 2/3, and you Bloodlust and becomes a 6-power creature, and you Berserk that creature, and it becomes 12 power. So you can just rip your opponent's face off for incredible amounts of damage, and of course Berserk gives trample, which means that if they're chump blocking like Juggernaut or Suchi or whatever, then it doesn't get there. I don't have Fork in the deck, which is because I didn't want any double cards. You notice every single card is 1 blue, 1 red, or 1 green, nothing double. So that means that you have, incidentally, for the Guardian Beast mana, you've got Black Source, Black Source, Black Source, Black Source, Source of Black, Elves of Deep Shadow, Source of Black, Birds of Paradise. So, but anyway, everything costs just exactly 1 mana of its colors, so that's why Fork isn't in here. Because the old school combo would have been like Berserk, Fork, and then so you double it again, and you do that on like a Juggernaut, so that 5 becomes 10, 10 becomes 20, and you just kill your opponent. But I don't have that. However, I think that's okay. It's a little bit much going for that. There's tons of damage in here. There's even Concordant Crossroads to give all creatures haste, which also kills the Abyss if you happen to face the Abyss, because it is a world enchantment, and so is the Abyss, and you can only have 1 enchant world in play at any one time. Concordant Crossroads also gives you like these insane fast starts where you can potentially in fact, this deck can kill, I think, on turn 2. there's a world where you can actually turn 2, kill your opponent. There's also a world where you can turn 2, Guardian Beast, Chaos Orb their land, and still have it in play and just Chaos Orb them every turn for the rest of the game. So the deck has multiple counters to protect, like because you're going to go all in on an ATOG or something. You want to protect it, so you've got Flash counter to stop instants. You've got Power Sink. If you have the mana, you can disrupt with the Power Sink, but you also have Avoid Fate, which is the green counter spell. Instant or enchantment that targets a permanent you control. So this will stop a disenchant, or it'll stop Swords to Plowshares or something like that. So you've got that, counter this instant, and Power Sink, and that's it. I don't have a mana drain in here. Once again, double blue. Didn't want to run something like that. Could be a card that belongs in here, but maybe not. There's some funky combos in here. You've got Urnum Djinn, which gives your opponent Forest Walk, and you've got Hammerheim, which takes away Land Walk. So if you need to block, you can actually do that. There's also a Sedge Troll hiding in here. Another like ultra. It's the best value. Like at 3 mana for a 3 power creature in old schools is a lot, but a 3 power creature with an upside is totally a lot. So like Serendib 3/4 flyer has a downside, but it's still the premier flyer in old school. And then Sedge Troll gets +1/+1 and regenerates. It becomes a 3/3 regenerator for black mana, as long as you have a swamp, which we've got multiples in here. So even if you don't, it's fine. You'll probably just play other things like Stone Rain and Ice Storm and whatnot. Also great with Black Vice, Howling Mine, and Aqua Mishra. So all in told, this deck tries to rip your face off, and it's kind of like all in on that game plan, but generates tons of mana, super fast, tons of cards, tons of damage. The only issue is whether or not the mana base will work out. But that's a question that I don't actually have the answer to, because as you can see, I'm missing a ton of cards online. Plus, we can't even test Chaos Orb. But I mean, even if I could, I have to get all these cards with the borders around them. I have to pick all those up, so that's a bunch more money before I can even test this deck, and then see if any of the cards that aren't in here, like these guys or some other things, should be in here. So kind of how it is. But I thought you might like seeing the old school deck. Icy, you may be wondering, it seems a little slow in an aggro deck, but Icy taps blockers, it taps Mazes of Ith to prevent them from stopping damage. It taps Guardian Beasts so that you can detonate one of their artifact. It also taps a Winter Orb or a Howling Mine, so only you get the cards, or only they get the effect of the Winter Orb. And all those things are super powerful and important. And so for all those reasons, the Icy's in there. Plus you need payoff cards if you're going to run a Workshop and Vault. And this deck would love to run like Soul Ring and other cards. This is an aggro deck that loves Soul Ring. However, Soul Ring is like a 4-point card, and if you actually look at the old school, Singleton point list, this is exactly 7 points. Versus what I'm not playing. There's cards that you could play with here, like for example Mana Vault. Maybe Mana Vault comes out and instead you want a different 1-point card like Fireball maybe. But I think that speed in a deck with both Timetwister and Wheel of Fortune makes more sense. I do not have Regrowth, which actually seems really good for me. Like Chaos Orb Regrowth is insane. Timetwister Regrowth is nuts. Multiple Lightning Bolting your opponent's face and stuff, really good. Being able to get a Winter Orb or Howling Mine that they killed is really good, or a Vice. Or just, the old Timetwister Regrowth over and over and over till they're dead. But it's a 1-point card, and I felt like, again, Mana Vault just seems way more powerful. Vice is a 2-point card, it's got to be in there. Other cards in here at different points. You can take a look if you Google up old school Singleton. You'll get the point list, and you'll get a better sense of what's going on with this deck and why I spent the points the way that I did. So anyway, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed the. We got a deck intro for the returning Brea deck. We've got gameplay. I've got an open-ended question that you can assist with, and of course I have this old school monstrosity that you can goof around with. I don't even know if Power Sync belongs in this deck. Maybe it should be like Shatter. Anyway, I'll figure it out. We need some gameplay with that. But hopefully you enjoyed all of that. This is the bonus at the end that I was talking about before. And thank you very much for watching. And now you see why I have all those losses against Brian Weissman. And I'll see you next time.